Om Sahana Bhavatu Sahana Bhunaktu Sahaviryam Karuvavahai Tejasvinavadhitamastu ma vidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Om Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shri Vasari Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. So we are on the last verse of 10 very powerful key verses of the Bhagavad Gita. And we are discussing the topic of moksha. So we've covered dharma, artha, kama, moksha. So these four topics, you can take these four topics, the purusharthas, and lay those topics over any verse in the Bhagavad Gita, and you'll be able to see what topic, which issue Krishna is addressing. By the way, next week's session, Sunday session, is going to be more interactive, because what I'm going to do next session is I'll pull up a Bhagavad Gita verse and I'll ask each of you to identify whether the verse is dharma, artha, kama, or moksha, right? So I'll pull up a verse from Bhagavad Gita and you should be able to tell me or describe why a particular verse is a Dharma Shastra verse, is it an Artha Shastra verse, is it a Kama Shastra verse, or is it a Moksha Shastra verse? And in the beginning, it's going to be a little difficult. You may fall into the habit of trying to categorize a single verse as a particular type of Shastra verse. This is Artha Shastra. What you'll find is many verses in the Bhagavad Gita, and I'll select various verses accordingly, where a verse can be talking about both Dharma Shastra and Artha Shastra in the same verse. Or Dharma, most commonly you'll find a Dharma Shastra verse, a topic, and Moksha Shastra in the same verse. That'll happen. But of course, the exercise is for us to be able to see a verse from Bhagavad Gita and immediately recognize the verse as whether it's a Dharma, Artha, Kama, or Moksha Shastra verse. That's next week. Today, let's hone in more, a little more focused on identifying and understanding moksha. So in last week's session, we began talking about moksha shastra, but hold on here, I'm going to pull this up so that we can actually see it together. Give me a moment while I share views here. All right, so if you see here, from the Brahma Bhuta stage, one can choose either Brahma Nirvana or Paramdhama. To choose Paramdhama, the supreme abode, i.e. a relationship with the supreme, one takes up Buddhi or Bhakti Yoga. So Brahma Bhuta is the stage, that's the stage of moksha, right? Brahma Bhuta is the stage of moksha. We also know from last week's session, from last module 3.2, that before Brahma Bhuta, the living entity is called Jiva Bhuta, right? So Jiva Bhuta is that state wherein we are completely controlled by the Adishadvargas, Kam, Krodh, so on and so forth, right? Completely under the control of material nature. So we're called Jiva Bhuta. Human beings, animals, reptiles, insects, all living entities are classified as Jiva Bhuta, under the conditioning and the control of material nature, Prakriti, so on and so forth, Kam, Krodh, etc. Then, through the practices of spirituality, now it can be any particular yoga, it can be even a particular religion. It doesn't have to be only Hinduism. Various other religions I use the word religion in the most positive sense, right? Oftentimes religions, including even in Hinduism, religions can be overtaken by forces or individuals who have nefarious intent. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about the core tenets of any religion, Christianity, Buddhism, Islam, any religion. The core tenets, the core spiritual goal is really liberation, described in different terminology, but the purpose is getting the Jiva Bhuta really to unification with, relationship with the Supreme, however they describe it. Giving Jiva Bhuta to Brahma Bhuta. So Brahma Bhuta is the stage where the living entity, you and I, are all free of material conditioning, and we are one with the Supreme, right? The spark has returned to the fire. The drop of water has returned to the ocean. We're already qualitatively one as Jiva Bhuta. Brahma Bhuta is when we have reconnected with our supreme origin source, if you will, right? Spark to fire, drop of water to the ocean. So that's the Brahma Bhuta state. That's moksha. Technically speaking, that's called Jivan Mukti, when the living entity has been qualitatively reunited with the Supreme, and we are functioning as, let me rephrase it, we are living and existing in our spiritual nature. So material conditioning, kam, krodh, lobha, moha, matsarya, those influences are not in control of our existence. Let me rephrase this. We'll go into it deeper. It is not that we don't feel hunger. It is not that we don't feel anger. It is not that we don't have to deal with the impetuses of kama, right? Desire. We deal with those things. The only difference is that we choose how we manifest. That's all. It's choice. It's all about choice. We have the ability, it's like a horse, right? A wild horse, either we have the ability to tame a wild horse or we don't. The horse remains the same. The horse is not the problem. I lived in Scandinavia for a time, and they had this wonderful, my friends there took great joy in throwing me down a mountain and call it teaching me how to ski. And they would all, after I, rolled 2 kilometers down the mountains head over heels, they'd meet me at the bottom of the mountain and say, Mahavishnu, it's not the mountain that kills you, it's your inability to ski. So they brush me off, take me back up to the top of the mountain, and push me down again. And sure enough, I eventually learned. So it is not the mountain, it is not the horse, it is not kam, krodh, lobha, moha that's the problem. It really isn't. It's our ability to deal with them, to master them, to transform that energy and use that energy for the upliftment of ourselves and others around us. That's Brahma Bhuta. That's Jivan Mukti. Okay? So we come to Brahma Bhuta, this stage. We come to Jivan Mukti. We have achieved freedom, liberation in this life. Freedom means not under control. But now we come to a point where we can choose. We can choose to move forward, if you will, and exist in Brahma Nirvana. Brahma Nirvana is, we're Brahma Bhuta. Brahma Nirvana is, one could say, the space in which we exist, right? The place, the locale. And that's a very tricky nomenclature, because to say Brahma Nirvana is a place, it both is and it isn't. Brahma Nirvana, we can exist in Brahma Nirvana right here, right now. But it does have the connotation of a space, right? Brahma Nirvana is the nature of the environment that we live in, right? A person who is Brahma Bhuta, wherever they go, is Brahma Nirvana, right? We may have this experience when you're in the presence of a very empowered, saintly person. Just the space in which you enter becomes surcharged with an energy that you cannot really name, but you can appreciate. They literally bring Brahma Nirvana wherever they go, or they take Brahma Nirvana wherever they go. This kind of area of spiritual existence or space. I mean, similarly, an individual who is a knucklehead, when you enter their space, you can feel they resonate with foolishness. Try to use mild language in this regard. So this is not an uncommon phenomenon. We experience this. So this is Brahma Nirvana. This is what the Buddhists talk about quite much. Brahma Nirvana is a term very much used in Buddhist terminology as well. But it's the same thing. It's Krishna's description of Brahma Nirvana and the Buddhist description is almost 99% similar. They're describing the same thing. But then we come to what's put here in the Gita, Krishna calls Param Dhamma, that supreme abode, that supreme destination. And in the 18th chapter of Bhagavad Gita, Krishna, Brahma Bhuta Prasanatmas, chapter 18, text 65. Forgive me, I didn't have a chance to bring it up here because I actually had to travel from home. I'm at the Mandir now. So I've been driving all morning. Be that as it may. So chapter 18, text 55. Is it 55 or 65? Devyani, if you know this verse, you may be
I think
familiar.
it's 54. I think it's 54, but
54. Yes,
I'm
that's it.
just
54. Brahma Bhuta Prasanatma. Yeah, 55 is Karma Kren. Yes. Thank you, Devyani. So in chapter 18, text 54, Krishna says, Brahma Bhuta Prasanatma Nasochatina Kankshati Sama Sarveshu Bhuteshu Mad Bhaktim Labhate Param. So Krishna says, Brahma Bhuta Prasanatma. When a person comes to the state of Brahma Bhuta, no longer Jiva Bhuta, but there's Jivan Mukti. In this life, in this body, we've come to Jivan Mukti. We come to the Brahma Bhuta stage. Krishna says, at that stage, one can then, Nashotchati Nakangshati, there's no more misery, there's no more, they completely mastered the influences of material nature. But at that state, Brahma Bhuta state, one can begin to develop love for Krishna, love for the Supreme, a relationship with the Supreme. Brahma Bhuta Prasanatmana Sochatina Kankshati, Sama Sarveshu Bhuteshu, equal and what's the term? Interested in the welfare of all living entities. Sama Sarveshu Bhuteshu, Mad Bhaktim Labate Pranam. At that state, one can mad bhakti, right? One can develop love for the Supreme from the stage of Brahma Bhuta. Because then at that state, when we're no longer under the control of material nature, of Triguna, of Prakriti, Kam, Krodh, all of that, at that state, we have the freedom to choose. Mad Bhaktim Labate Param. We can choose a loving relationship with the Supreme. If we have no freedom, we cannot choose. Love requires choice. Absolutely essential. If we have no freedom of being, if we have no freedom of self-understanding, no freedom of existence in terms of being overwhelmed by material nature, how can we possibly choose a loving relationship? So freedom is essential. Coming to the stage of Brahma Bhuta is essential. And then from that state, Mad Bhaktim Labate Param, we can choose a relationship with the Supreme. In the 9th chapter of Bhagavad Gita, Krishna calls this supreme science was that's the 4th chapter. Raja Vidya Raja Guya, right? This very ancient science of that's chapter 4. This knowledge is a king of education, the most secret of all secrets, right? Raja Vidya Raja Guya. What's the secret Krishna is talking about? The secret Krishna is talking about is that one can have a relationship with the Supreme. At the end of the 8th chapter, Krishna talks about how one can attain Brahma Nirvana, how one can come to the stage of Brahma Bhuta and experience and attain Brahma Nirvana. And then Krishna goes right into the 9th chapter and says, Raja Vidya Raja Guya. Because at the very end of the 8th chapter, Krishna adds, one can come to Param Dhamma, one can come to me. He ends it there and goes into the 9th chapter talking about this knowledge, this understanding of Param Dhamma. It is the highest education. It is the most secret of all secrets. It's a secret, this idea that we can choose Param Dhamma, for a very important reason. Now, it's not because no one knows about it. That's not why it's a secret, so to speak. The knowledge is everywhere. Krishna's been saying it for all throughout the Vedic literature. It's a secret because no one wants it. It's a secret because we are afraid of relationships. This is very, very important to understand. We fear relationships for a very good reason. We are, what's the term? We have post-traumatic stress disorder. And this is, it's no laughing matter, but it's very, very deep, and it's very, very ingrained in our material conditioning through lifetimes. We recognize, we know, and we have experienced that the greatest pain we have ever experienced has come at the hands of another living entity. Think about it. In your own life, your greatest pain, the greatest harm, the greatest hurt you've ever experienced has always come from another living being. Let that sink in for a second. Now, this is true of this life. Now, we have had this experience through numerous lifetimes. No matter what body we've been in, the most harmful experiences we've had in existence has come at the hands of another living entity. That's the trauma. So we are naturally impelled towards any experience that guards against being harmed by another living entity. So we do not endeavor to choose that relationship. We would rather choose Brahma Nirvana, because within Brahma Nirvana, there is no relationship. There is merging spark back into fire, a drop of water back into the ocean, but there is no relationship. Merging is a type of relationship. Bear with me. There is no relationship of reciprocal give and take from one to the other. That's another reason why we would prefer. I was watching a movie the other night. Actually, I won't quote that because it's cruel. Forgive me. We prefer relationships with pets because even though we love them and so on and so forth, the reciprocal relationship is very limited. They eat when we feed them. They go to the bathroom when we take them, if it's a dog. You know what I mean? They live within the confines we put around them. So the pet has no freedom, very little freedom. Now, we may give it a gilded cage. We may take care of it. Its health care, its food, everything. But it's still living in a gilded cage. It cannot talk back to us. It cannot say, no, I refuse. If the pet says, no, I refuse, what happens? During the pandemic, and this is very, very unfortunate, at least here in the United States, during the pandemic, we were all shut in our homes, and everyone got a pet because we wanted companionship, this very limited relationship with a pet, with this companionship. After the pandemic, we went out into the world, had fun, and it was an absolute tsunami of pets being returned to shelters. And all of a sudden, shelters are overwhelmed with pets. And what happened, I don't know if I can even say this. This is going to be recorded and put on YouTube, so I don't know what the terms are. But let's put it very mildly. The Disney version, they had to put those pets to sleep. Think about that. Love? No, love is, even when it's inconvenient, that's bhakti, that's unconditional love. Even when it's inconvenient, love still exists. Love is still there. So that's a relationship. So, point I'm getting at is we have millions of lifetimes of this experienced trauma of the greatest harm we've experienced has come from relationships. But there is, of course, the flip side. The greatest, and you think of this as well, take a moment to consider, our greatest, most pleasurable, most uplifting experiences also come from relationship. Always has. I mean, this is scientific. I mean, Harvard University has done like a 70-year study on the happiest people. Always those who can describe themselves as being in loving relationships. They live longer, they're healthier, they're happier, they're more content, they deal with life changes and life tragedies better when they are in loving relationships. So the problem is not relationship. That's the trauma that we've carried for lifetimes. And it's also our lived experience. The issue is learning how to transform relationships. That's what Bhakti Yoga is all about. So now let's go to the next part of the, because we're talking about moksha, right? So this Jivan Mukti, we come to the stage from Jiva Bhuta to Brahma Bhuta. Now we are free. We are no longer under the control of material nature. We know how to ski down the mountain. We know how to ride and tame a wild horse. Freedom. And then we exist in this state of Brahma Nirvana. Because we're actually living in concert with our spiritual nature. That's Brahma Nirvana, Brahma Bhuta. We are manifesting our spiritual nature because we are spirit beings. I love philosopher Chardin, right? We're not human beings having a spiritual experience. We are spiritual beings having a human experience. So our spiritual nature is now being manifest. We are now living at our complete, full spiritual potential. Brahma Nirvana. Brahma Bhuta. Now, at this point, we have to make a choice. Do we want to re-engage in loving relationships, or would we rather not have relationships and just exist in this state devoid of Brahma? Nashochati nakankshati. There is no misery. There's no anxiety. Brahma Nirvana, there is no anxiety, there is no misery. And we can choose to exist in that space. Or, and this is a secret, we can choose to have relationship. Mad bhaktim labate param. However, that is bhakti. That requires an ability to transform relationships and uplift them into bhakti and have such a relationship with the Supreme. That's param dhamma. That's the supreme abode. So it is only a secret in that it's a rarely chosen state of being. Let me rephrase that. At the outset, Krishna says, again, where is this? I think it's in the 9th chapter. Where Krishna says, Devyani, you may know this, where Krishna says, one who understands me is very rare, right? What's that verse? I think it's in the 9th chapter. Krishna says, nope, that's not it. Well, Krishna says, Manushyanam sahasreshu kashyatati siddhaye. Krishna says, out of many individuals, one may endeavor for Brahma Nirvana. One out of many millions, right? And we can actually see this. Krishna says out of many thousands. Krishna says sahasreshu. And that was back in Krishna's time. We can easily say, use the word laksha, right? In many millions upon millions of people, one may endeavor for Brahma Bhuta. And Krishna says, Manushyanam sahasreshu kashid yatati siddhaya yatatamapi siddhanam. Out of many millions who may endeavor, out of many, many millions of people, one may endeavor, and out of many millions who endeavor, siddhaya, only one may gain Brahma Bhuta, only one may come to Brahma Nirvana. And out of the many, many millions who come to Brahma Bhuta, Krishna says one of those may choose love, may choose Param Dhamma. That's how rare it is, simply because of this deep aversion to pain. And that's okay. That's understandable. But the secret is what is confidential. I won't say secret. What is confidential, or what is rarely understood or known, is the option that's rarely chosen. Let's put it that way. The option that is rarely chosen is the fact that you actually can, through bhakti, transform relationships. Love, bhakti. Now, of course, in a relationship, there's freedom. The other person may not reciprocate. And that's entirely to them. That's what freedom's all about. It doesn't mean that we do not experience bhakti. It doesn't mean we cannot manifest and still exist in unconditional love. Absolutely, we can. The only difference is we have the ability to take any relationship, any interaction, and we can respond to it with love. Now, we have to make this very, very clear. I'm start to wrap it up here. Love does not mean being a doormat. Love, let's use the Sanskrit term. Bhakti is not about being a doormat. Bhakti is not about sentimentality. It's very unfortunate in this day and age, at least in the new age arena, bhakti is, everything bhakti is having a kirtan. And it's limited to that. At least I'll speak about it, in terms of the modern day expression of bhakti and, the yoga industry, which is what has become, unfortunately. Bhakti is, we're going to have a bhakti kirtan, and they go and have a wonderful, emotional and sentimentally charged kirtan. Wonderful. That's not even the tip of the iceberg of what bhakti is. Bhakti is not sentimentality. Bhakti is not going into the jungle with a plate of prasad because you want to be nice to the tiger. The cute little kitty, come here, kitty, and it's a tiger. That's the Hollywood, Bollywood description of love, where you're a doormat, you're living in sentimentality. No, bhakti, it's a wild animal. It needs to stay in the jungle. I'm going to build a fence. That is bhakti. Sentimentality is you go out and you try and feed it. Or conversely, we abuse. We go and try to kill it so we mount its fur on our wall. We either exploit or abuse in a relationship, or we have this relationship with sentimentality. Neither of those are bhakti. Bhakti is no, it's a wild animal. Let me give it the space for it to be what it's going to be. That's bhakti. And if it's an individual, okay, this individual has the mentality of a tiger. Be in that space. When you're ready for a relationship of love, I am always here. That's what Krishna has done with us, right? There's the example in the Puranas, Upanishads. Two birds sitting in the tree. One bird, the living entity, Jiva Bhuta, is going from tree to tree, or body from body, trying to eat the fruit. The second bird is the witness bird, Paramatma, following the Jiva Bhuta, following the living entity from body to body, branch to branch, as the living entity tries to eat all the fruit and have happiness. Paramatma says nothing. Paramatma simply follows, waiting when the Jiva Bhuta turns and wants to have a relationship of love. Paramatma is always there. That's bhakti. When you're ready, I am here in love. It's not sentimentality. I'm not going to try to feed you when you're a wild animal. All you're going to do is eat me. And I'm not going to try to shoot you and mount your fur on my wall in exploitation. So this is the less chosen path because it does put us at risk. In the sense that it seemingly puts us at risk, right? Because we've always experienced, going back to our lived experiences, we've always experienced harm, our greatest harm, coming from other living entities. And now, Krishna is saying in the Bhagavad Gita, love. And that brings us to, I've completely run out of time, but I was coming to this particular verse. This is the last verse of the 10 verses, right? Sarva dharmam parityaja mam ekam sharanam. Sarva dharmam parityaja, give up all dharma. At the Brahma Bhuta stage, you can give up all dharma. When you come to Brahma Nirvana, dharma is no longer necessary. In terms of your progress, dharma is necessary to live in society. Absolutely. Krishna's not saying that. But dharma as a vehicle to bring you in spiritual progress is no longer necessary. So at that point, sarva dharmam parityaja mam ekam sharanam. From the Brahma Bhuta stage, mam ekam sharanam, choose param dharma. choose a loving relationship with me. Aham tvam sarva papebhyo moksha ishami. Masucha. I shall deliver you. I shall give you additional, even more freedom. Freedom to choose relationships of love. So, bhakti, ekam sharanam, is both the process and the goal. Brahma Bhuta Prasanatan Nasoshyati Nakanshati Samasarveshu Bhuteshu Mad Bhaktim Labhate Para. So bhakti is both the process to engage in to choose the path of bhakti, is both the process of spiritual development, so that you can engage in bhakti, relationships of love. And that is videha. That is, even after the falling of this life, the passing of this body, you can still live in relationships of love with the Supreme. Still live in relationships of love with everyone around, the world that we exist in. Right? So this is the final verses, chapter 18, text 66, I believe is this verse. Sarva Dhamam Pratija Mam Ekam Sharanam. From the stage of Brahma Bhuta, there's the option, there's the choice, because there's freedom after Brahma Bhuta stage. Moksha Shami Mashicha. Mam Ekam Sharanam, when you have a relationship of love with me, one can, well, having a relationship, Mame Kam Sharanam, both brings us to moksha. Mame Kam Sharanam Braja, Mokshi Shamimachu. So by having a relationship of love, one can even come to the Brahma Bhuta stage. And while one has achieved that stage, one is in a relationship with the Supreme. That is Param Dhamma. So bhakti is both the process and the end result. So it is through a relationship of love, through a relationship of bhakti, that one can come to Brahma Bhuta and progress from Brahma Bhuta onto Param Dhamma, where one actually experiences a reality, an existence, where there are nothing but relationships of love. And even when other individuals do not want a relationship of love, you are able to, or we are able to exist in a loving space. We may have to put up a wall while that other individual progresses in their own spiritual journey, but we're always able to exist, to manifest, and to interact from a place of bhakti. And that requires practice. That's what the bhakti yoga process actually is. And I'll end on this note, if there's ever any questions, always just interject. I'll end on this final note. Moment has passed. Anyways, so that is understanding moksha in a nutshell. All right. So there's always this choice, whereas we can certainly always exist in Brahma Bhuta, but Brahma Bhuta is the place from which we can launch into relationships of love. Bhakti both brings us to the stage of Brahma Bhuta, the practices of Bhakti Yoga, and having achieved Brahma Bhuta, we can go from that point into relationships with the Supreme. Yes, Devyani.
Okay. I just going back on what you were talking about. So you're talking about the Brahma Buddha and you're talking about Brahma Nirvana and the Paramdam. Can I just clarify um that when you're in the Brahma Buddha stage, you have a choice and either you can choose Brahma Nirvana or you can choose Brahma Paramdhamma. Is that true?
Yes,
Okay. So I just want to clarify.
absolutely. And even then, that choice can actually be made even before the Brahma Bhuta stage. And that's what we actually really commonly see in this day and age. And that's why Krishna was saying that was not chapter 9, that was actually chapter 7, Manushanam Sahasreshu. Even at the very beginning of our spiritual development, we can't even conceive of a world of loving relationships. We would rather negate. Why is it that a lot of spiritual traditions don't want to picture or have a physical representation of the Supreme? Right? Because if you have a physical representation of the Supreme, if that physical representation is a woman, that will trigger my misogyny. If that physical representation is of a black man, that'll trigger my racism, or a white man, that will trigger my racism, right? So we don't want to, a lot of spiritual practices do not want to picture, even, cannot even have a problem having an image of the Supreme because of a fear of it triggering our traumas. So it is best that don't have a picture of from because there's always something. There's a wonderful picture in the Boston Temple, and some of you may have seen it. There's a picture of baby Krishna in diapers, little baby Krishna in diapers, and he's sucking on his big toe. Take that picture and consider it. Just meditate on it for a moment. If you have difficulty seeing the Supreme as a person, as an individual, you cannot wrap your head around God, the Supreme Being, as a baby in diapers sucking on their big toe. Those of us here, we can actually, we were exposed to, we have no problem. But that is actually a very triggering picture for all kinds of spiritualists, religious people. That picture of God in diapers sucking on their big toe. So even from the very beginning of our spiritual journey, we have a problem with personhood. We have a problem with the Supreme being a person because of our traumas, because of our racism, because of our misogyny, because of our phobias. So we want God to be a mist. We want God to be a supreme energy with no attributes, because God's attribute can trigger our phobias, can trigger our trauma. So it's best that God be a mist. It's best that God be a puff of smoke, be some amorphous something, because if God is other than that, then it triggers my phobias. So from the very beginning of our spiritual practice, we're already choosing a practice that will eliminate personhood from the Supreme and thereby eliminate the possibility of relationship, because our trauma is based on past relationships. Our greatest harms have come from relationships with living entities. So we do not want God to have any kind of attribute that is remotely individualistic, because we can't handle it. That's why this is a secret. It's not a secret. It's we are too traumatized and we do not have the courage. A lot of spiritual, in Bhakti Yoga, a lot of the teachings is about developing the courage to choose relationship. That's a lot of the working that has to be done. That's a lot of the purification, is purifying our traumas regarding relationship. So the choice, and I'll end here, unless there's some other things to be discussed. Any questions? From the very beginning of our spiritual process and practices, we have to recognize that we're dealing with traumas based in relationship. This is why people can look at the Bhagavad Gita. I've had someone say this to me. Oh my good Lord in heaven. Someone say to me, in the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna never says he's God. Have you read the Bhagavad Gita? You may not agree that Krishna is God, and that's perfectly fine. That's the debate to be had. But there is no debate that Krishna does not say explicitly, repeatedly, constantly, almost from beginning to end, he claims to be the Supreme. That's clear. But because we as human beings, as conditioned living entities, as Jiva Bhuta, we are so traumatized. We can read the Bhagavad Gita and just completely block out the fact that Krishna is saying he's a person, he's God, and he's a supreme. We can completely block it out. That's how traumatized we are regarding relationships. Who was it? Emerson, Thoreau. There's various quotes. They've read the Bhagavad Gita. I think it was Emerson. He wrote, no, it was Thoreau. He talks about, I've read the Bhagavad Gita and it was the most wonderful morning I've ever experienced. That's it. It's the most wonderful morning you've experienced reading the Bhagavad Gita. It should have been earth shattering. Whether you, not revelatory into, oh, yes, I'm love of God. No, it should be earth shattering. Here's an individual claiming to be God. That's something you want to read that passage again. What is this person on about? What claims are this person making? But no, we are so traumatized, not only in this life, billions of lifetimes, where other living entities have been the source of our abject misery, that we begin a spiritual path.
So what do they
Holding
say
on to
then?
that trauma. Oh, I'm sorry.
So what do they say then if he's not God? Then they say he's the because Krishna says, I am the seed giving father. He's all the time saying he's God. But then they say something to negate the fact that he's God. I can't remember what it is. It's something about it's not God, but the soul within the God or something.
You're absolutely correct. It depends on who you talk to. Some people just completely just deny it. He doesn't say it. I'm thinking those are the ones that are really in denial. And there's quite a few. And then there's those who have a little more nuance. They understand a little bit more of the Sanskrit, and they say, no, it's the supreme ism coming into human form. That's the more common, that's the more nuanced version, the more knowledgeable version. They'll say, no, it's the supreme what is everything, assuming human form and then speaking to Arjuna. That takes a little bit more intellectual gymnastics on their part, and that can be easily debunked just from the Sanskrit itself. Krishna completely obliterates that. He says, like, I've always been this way. He what's the word? He counters that and he debunks that idea very early on in the second chapter of the Bhagavad Gita. He says, I've always been like this. I've been like this in the past, in the future. I have never not been who I am. He dispels that argument in the second chapter, but people just gloss over that and carry on. And it's denial. It's denial. Now, you can argue that no, Krishna is not the supreme. That's where the argument can be had, whether you want to accept me the supreme or not. That's a absolutely wonderful argument to have. But you cannot argue that he himself doesn't claim it, that Arjuna doesn't agree with him as he's saying it. That part is undeniable. So we have to start there. Then we can go on whether or not Krishna is the supreme. That's something else to be had. But that also ties back to our traumas, that we really don't want the supreme to have attributes, because the supreme having attributes triggers our traumas. And that's what bhakti yoga is about. That's why the process of bhakti yoga is what gives us the courage to address our problems. But every Vedic spiritual process is about addressing those traumas. And when those traumas are addressed, we come to Brahma Bhuta. And oftentimes it's described that at the Brahma Bhuta stage, what happens is the individual can, from that stage, more easily, it's the story of the four Kumaras. I don't know how many of you know the four Kumaras, Sanat, Sanatana, Sananda, and Sanat Kumara. Four Kumaras, they had come to the Brahma Bhuta stage, and they were completely realized. And it's very easy from the Brahma Bhuta stage to then fall into a relationship with Krishna, with the Supreme, as an individual. It's easier from that point. And for the four Kumaras, it was very different. I think it was described that they smelled lotus flower, a flower that fell from the feet from the garland of Lord Vishnu, and they were on to Paramdhama. So it's certainly very easy from the point of Brahma Bhuta to then go into Paramdhama. It's easier than having not being at the stage of Brahma Bhuta. The key point is that it has to be chosen. It has to be chosen because love requires freedom. Krishna is never going to enforce himself upon the living entity. That's not love. That's not bhakti. So we'll end there. And remember, next week's session, we're going to be an exercise. We're going to take verses from the Bhagavad Gita, I'll put them on the screen, and we're going to tease out whether the verse is a Dharma Shastra verse, Artha Shastra verse, Kama Shastra verse, or Moksha Shastra verse. So we're going to have an exercise, and we actually begin to use the knowledge we've gained to be able to understand what verse is talking about what in the Bhagavad Gita. Om Sahana Vavatu Sahana Bhunaktu Sahaviryam Karuvavahai Tejasvinavadhitamastu ma vidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Om Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shrivasari Gaura Bhaktivinoda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. I will put all of this information in our WhatsApp group, all of the videos and PDFs and so on. Have a wonderful weekend. Hari Hari.
Hare Krishna.